Ned nervously watched the Cadbury's delivery truck reverse carefully down the mountain path. There were large signs everywhere. Keep away. Danger. The driver had told them in no uncertain terms that he didn't have time to hang about or wait for someone to meet them, so he was just leaving them in the middle of nowhere. The truck's engine cut out and it began to slide in the snow, sending gravel and stones skittering down the mountain. Ned's mother clutched his arm, digging her nails in. The driver revved the engine and began to descend again, cautiously. Ned peeled his mother's hand from his arm and held it, giving it a reassuring squeeze, running his thumb over the dent of her finger where her wedding ring used to be. Up until then, he hadn't realized she'd taken it off. Ned kept his eyes fixed on the distinctive writing on the side of the truck as it backed away from them, remembering the last time he had a bar of Cadbury's chocolate. When it was first announced that sweets were to be rationed, almost 2 years ago, he'd run to the shop to stock up. But when he got there, the dairy milk bars had already disappeared. The shopkeeper had replaced them with a pale imitation that made Ned's teeth itch when he bit into it. Ned shook himself slightly. It was freezing up on the slopes in the bitter wind. He couldn't believe that they'd finally arrived, after their long and complicated train journeys. But now they were here, in this wild, remote landscape, and without a clear idea of what was to happen next. Ned's stomach growled. They'd not stopped to eat anything on the way to Wales, and he was, as usual, absolutely starving. Since the cup of tea and a few slices of bread and jam before they'd left the house, the only thing he'd eaten were the spam sandwiches his mother had packed. The journey had seemed to go on forever. The train had stopped and started so many times. They'd waited for what felt like hours while a troop train had been moved. But no one complained. No one asked any questions. It was simply accepted that the government had taken control of all the railways, ports and roads and would do with them as they wished. Ned had stared out of the window to distract himself. He'd counted all the cars he could see abandoned by the side of the railway lines following the rationing of petrol. Railway sleepers haphazardly criss-crossed fields to stop parachutists from landing. Roadblocks were here, there and everywhere. Shop names were scrubbed out ready for enemy invasion, which was all anyone could talk about on the wireless. He'd stared out onto anonymous station platforms. They could be anywhere. Having never really travelled far from Bletchley, Ned had expected to feel rattled, but he was brimming with excitement. He was escaping. It was his turn for an adventure, and he was more than ready for it. Before they got on the train, his mother had recommended that he only take small sips from their flask of Bovril. This had paid off, because there was no corridors on the train, which meant no toilets. One man had pushed down a window and peed out of it, to the collective horror of the carriage. "Desperate times, desperate measures," he said with a deep laugh. Ned got a gentle prod in the ribs from his mother's knitting needle for smirking. "Why don't you look out of the other window?" she'd quietly suggested. Her needles clacked and clicked in time with those of other women in their carriage. Everyone was knitting something or other. 2 old nosy Noras sitting opposite knitted scarves while scanning the carriage. They didn't look down once at their stitches. It was, he had to admit, impressive. No doubt they'd felt they were keeping up morale by making clothes for the troops. He'd fixed his stare on a Ribena advertisement, but that didn't help his bladder, and so his mind had wandered back to his favourite topic: food. His mother had promised him a hot meal once they'd arrived at Manod, but here they were, and the only signs of life they'd spotted on their way up the wide Welsh valley were sheep, goats, and a farm or two. Birds of prey had been circling menacingly, their hunting spoilt by the snow. The lorry driver said he'd seen an eagle, or possibly an osprey. Ned thought that he must have been joking.